The thing about the book too is doesn't matter where you live. I have a whole chapter on opportunities to step in if you live in a blue part of the country, opportunities if you live in the purple, and likewise in the red. And if you live in the purple, excuse me, if you live in the blue or red, you can export your time, money, and effort to where it will move the needle most in the purple swing districts. And so plenty of opportunities for stepping in with a menu of choices. Please consider taking election day off. And if you live, no matter where you live, I strongly recommend spend a weekend or more in September and October in a purple state. No matter where you live, you're either a close drive from, if you're in a blue, like in DC, you could drive to Pennsylvania. It's a purple state, right? Not too far from North Carolina, where Roy Cooper's running for the Senate. I can't imagine waking up on November 4th thinking, I wish I'd done a little bit more, and now we're in an autocracy, and we're close to it already. And it's not an exaggeration to say that. So yeah, everybody can do their part, and there's a how-to, and you can step into whatever works for you.
Here's a man who could have coasted. Gary Lux spent 4 decades as an environmental attorney, the kind of lawyer that Fortune 500 companies keep on speed dial, with close to 500 compliance audits behind him and a textbook that law schools actually teach from. Comfortable, respected. He could have stayed in that lane forever, but he didn't. Back in 2004, Gary started a scrappy little group out of the East Bay called the Progressive Action East Bay, and 2 years later it was helping Democrats take back Congress. So he kept going. He founded an Indivisible chapter, helped seed a national volunteer movement, and wrote policy briefings for governors and senators. Then he did the thing that tells you who he actually is. He sat down and wrote books for ordinary, exhausted people who feel like nothing they do matters. One of them is literally called You Are Not Alone, and his newest, We Are the Power, is a street-level field manual for anyone who wants to do more than protest and post before this November. Gary is a teacher, a scientist, a whitewater rafter, a man who believes that cavalry is not coming, so we better become it ourselves. This is exactly what we're here to talk about. So without further ado, welcome to What Do We Do Next? Gary, thanks for being here.
Molly, thank you so much for having me. Real pleasure.
Well, this is a personal one for me because I feel like I'm doing something, but I don't feel like I'm doing enough, and I'm feeling very stuck. And so I'm really curious, in the intro I said that, you had every reason to stay in the comfortable, lane. You didn't have to step out and make noise. You didn't have to get involved. You could have just coasted with what you were doing. What was that moment, that catalyst for you that pushed you over the edge?
Well, it's actually the catalyst pushed me over the edge 40 plus years ago. It's just been the same driver. So when I was in college, I worked on my first campaign, and I didn't know much about campaign actions, but I grew into the experience and have been working on a campaign every 2 years for 40 plus years. And the first 20 years, I'd have to say, give or take, I was always a behind the scenes guy. Like as I shared, I wrote policy papers for our Governor Newsom and Senator Feinstein, when she was running for governor, actually, and then state legislators. My preference is work in policy. That's what I'm wired to do and I enjoy, and that's my strength. But you can't do policy, you can't move the needle in those directions unless you have power. And so I've always been a behind the scenes guy, either helping with policy papers or advice and walking precincts, knocking on doors. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. And it's what everyone needs to be able to step into, or will suffer the consequences. And about 20 years ago, give or take, in 2004, I stepped my game up from the phone banking and knocking on doors to starting a group called the Progressive Action East Bay. I live in the Bay Area. And in 2004, I worked really hard on the John Kerry campaign. I did legal protection in Pennsylvania, in a swing state. And I came back, I was just demoralized when he narrowly lost to George W. Bush in a really narrow loss. And so I moved from getting the vote out as just one of the minions to starting a group called the Progressive Action East Bay. And we ended up, we had volunteers, maybe about 60 or 70 us met once a month. And we had a big fundraiser, and our efforts was a small part of what brought Nancy Pelosi into power with the gavel in Congress. And then 2 years later, we worked really hard on the Obama campaign. And it was such a glorious moment when Obama won. And the big lesson I learned, and I should have known better, was complacency is the enemy. For 8 years, I just kicked back, and I didn't work nearly as hard on campaigns, and we paid the price. And my son and I went to Las Vegas in 2016 to walk precincts for Hillary Clinton. He was a 10-year-old at the time, and there are a lot of stories about that. But I was planning a big party, a victory party, and I was convinced Hillary was going to win. And instead, I had 50 people in my living room, just licking our wounds and trying to figure out where we go from here. And we called it Coming Together at the time, and that's before the Indivisible movement had launched. So we formed, instead of the Progressive Action East Bay, we became the Resistance Action East Bay. We needed to resist the regime and where things were going. And before long, we joined the Indivisible movement and became one of the first Indivisible groups, a legacy group that has grown to 1,200 members. And so we're very, very active. And as you know, we have to assuage our anxiety and our worry and be part of the cavalry, which is what we've been doing for 10 years and what I write about in the latest book. You know, we are the power to win the future, because there is no one going to say it to, no one will save us. And we grew up with liberties and freedoms and expectations of what life in a democracy is like. And we took it all for granted, and it's up to us to be part of the solution to win it back and hold on to it.
Well, this is a very crazy full circle moment, Gary, because when John Kerry was running for president, my father, who is a two-term Vietnam vet, starred for and paid quite a lot of money for the Swift Boat Captains Against John Kerry television ad. Which, I was younger at the time, and obviously not as involved. I was in my early 20s, or I guess, well, I was skating a little bit too, right? But this is one of my biggest issues. My father and I have a lot of issues, needless to say. Right now, we are on polar opposite ends. My entire life has been impacted by his time in Vietnam with spinal issues and a team of doctors at Bethesda Naval and the whole bit. Which has never been acknowledged. And so it's just so crazy, because I'm trying to undo some of the damage that my father did, and his intentions or not. But what a full circle moment, because I don't think I'll ever forgive him for that. And I definitely set off a lot of things. It's also an example of how one or a few people can really do a lot of damage if they're intentional about it, good or bad. What a time. So let's talk about where we are right now, and what does that look like? Everything that you've learned in the last 20 years or 40 years of everything that you're doing, what do people need to know right now? Because there are a lot of stats about battleground states and percentages, and what are we doing? What should we be focused on right now?
Well, I feel like everybody has something to offer. Everybody has a skill, a talent, a resource, a connection, financial resources. And it is a collective that will get us where we need to go. So many people feel like, well, they've never done it before. They don't know where to go. Or they've been a lapsed activist who's demoralized, feels like, well, it doesn't matter because look what happened in 2024. And so I think we have to begin with the recognition that we can and will win this battle. And it will take all of us to do our part. And, a lot of times I'm a big news junkie, and there is so much effort and discussion around what the problem is by the pundits and newscasters. We know what the problem is. They've examined it from every angle, three-dimensionally unpacked it, and we know what the problem is. And we even know why we're here, because of disinformation and propaganda And so the what and the why is really clear, but the how is something that no one talks about. And if they do talk about it, they talk about it rhetorically, like, yeah, like Michelle Obama said, let's do something. But then that leaves people lost with what to do. And so essentially, the most important thing we can do today is commit a little bit of time. And so I'll talk about what that looks like in a moment. But think about how much time and emotional impact we have with our worry and our concern and our complaints on a daily basis. When you read the newspaper, look at your phone, watch the news, talk with someone at the water cooler or whatever, we're worried and complaining a lot. And those minutes of complaint and worry turn into hours on a weekly basis. And at the end of the month, you're talking hours and hours. And so let's say conservatively, you complain 4 hours a week. Times 4, that's 12 hours or so a month. Take 3 or 4 of those hours and commit to doing something today. And that means, and I'll talk about what that means or the how we do it in a moment. But number one, make a commitment of time. And in my book, I have a page or so on a contract with yourself. And it's a commitment of what we're going to do. We've got 4+ months to go. And so whatever fraction of the 12 hours, or whatever a month is, take an hour a week or maybe more, hopefully, and sign the commitment pledge. And a contract is an emotional connection that will ensure a follow through. And there's so many things you can do. Number one, you could join an Indivisible group like ours. There are 300 in California, 2,500 plus in the country. And or in the book, I list 80 organizations that we've researched and vetted. And there's many great, highly effective organizations organized by category, whether it's legal protection, raising money, swing states, you name it, we have it in there. And join an organization, meet friends. So many people feel alone. And the first book I wrote is You Are Not Alone, A Roadmap to Effective Political Action. We are not alone. There's so many more of us that are out there. And you come together in kindred spirits. And instead of being alone on the sidelines, you're together in purpose with kindred connections. So join a group in whatever capacity that you can offer. Our group, as I mentioned, has about 1,200 volunteers. And we meet twice a month, once in person and once by Zoom. And we build connections. People have made friendships, and you're together, rowing together in purpose. And there's a lot of power. And I call it political therapy. Because if you're alone in despair, you just get demoralized and you feel hopeless. But I can't tell you about the synergistic energy our group of volunteers have coming together, building connections, doing something meaningful. So number one, join a group.
I love that.
And more to, so in addition, there's several strategies I offer above and beyond just protesting. Now, protesting is great. It feels good. And there's lots of data showing that it has indirect benefits for sure. And there's some data suggesting that the No Kings in October 18th of this fall helped energize the New Jersey multi-digit win for Mikey Sherrill and then Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and many of the other races. So there are benefits. But if you think that going to a protest is your answer, I'll beg to differ, because protesting is far from enough. It's one of 31 flavors, and it will move the needle, but not nearly enough. So what do you do beyond that? Well, there are a couple of things I can share. One, I'd say, and this is not for everybody, but I think raising money is something that is part of the game. And so I'll share a little bit about fundraising right now. And so when we did our first fundraiser in 2017, as we came together as an Indivisible group, we put a lot of time and effort into a fundraiser. And it was great. It's fun. It was interesting. Great speakers, music, food, but an enormous logistical effort and undertaking. We netted about $18,000 at the time, and which was fine. And I'm proud to say that $18,000 was the first seed money that started a really effective organization, which is one of the 80 I list in the book, Activate America, which I can tell you more about in a moment. But at the time, they were called Flip the 14. And the Flip the 14 represented the 14 Republican seats in California's 53 congressional districts. And so the majority of congressional districts at the time were in, and as is today, in Democratic hands. The goal was to flip the remaining red seats to blue. And that organization that we helped fund flipped 7 seats from red to blue in 2018 during the midterms. That organization launched and became Activate America. And they take their expertise that was focused in 2018 on those 14 seats nationwide to purple swing districts across the country. What we learned along the way was fundraising in person is fun, interesting, but it's a lot of work. And what's an underutilized strategy I want to invite you and your listeners to focus on is virtual Zoom parties. Now, it's not rocket science, and it's not done nearly enough, and it needs to be done a whole lot more, and there's a way to do it effectively, which is on our website and in the book. We had a party last night. We raised about $15,000, we believe. It's preliminary at the moment. And the key, well, here's the thing. Let me give you a little more background. So we didn't learn the lesson in 2020. We were planning another big event. And that was to have a big concert. We had a team of volunteers pulling this concert together. One of our volunteers was the former bass player for Bonnie Raitt. We had a connection to David Crosby of the Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young. And after 6 months of planning, we were closing in on a big venue to raise about $150K net and serve as a gateway for people to volunteer and step into action. COVID derailed the entire effort. 6 months of planning could have been lost. But thankfully, we just pivoted and we started what we call these virtual parties for democracy. We raised $450,000 in 3 months. And we're one little Indivisible group. We had a lot of hosts, and we ultimately, each host invited their friends and family to a Zoom call with some planning across the country. And in 4 or 5 hours of effort, which is so much less than the face-to-face parties, the hosts, on average, generated $10,000 in an hour Zoom call, directing that money to a few of the organizations that they selected that are in my book, whether it's Activate America or Swing Left or the Move It Voter Project or Flip the Vote or the States Project. There's all kinds of great organizations, or the Hopium Chronicles. And you as the host decide where you want to focus your effort. And along the way, you educate your friends and family who are getting all these messages like give money here on this text. You can unsubscribe confidently. And on average, we raise about $10,000 for celebrating a birthday, a half birthday, saving democracy, whatever the theme is. And so at the end of the day, we need to raise a whole lot of money today. We've got 4 months. And if we wait till August and September, it's not going to be as effective as doing it today.
That's amazing. I have owned a multimedia company for 25 years, and I've done a lot of events. And the pandemic forced us we had a recording studio. It forced us to go remote, and it's so much better. And so I'm glad that you have also embraced that, because it's just, it's great to raise 150K, but if you got to spend 350K to raise it, then it might be flawed. You know what I mean? And that's no fault of your own. That's just how it was done for a long time. So why wouldn't you do the same thing? I have a question about the 80 people, the 80 groups. Are those like nationwide, or are those specific to California? Like, is that available to everybody, or?
Yeah. So I'm looking at. So this is the book here, and in the back I have the organization. So these are primarily nationwide. There are a handful that are local, but like there's a bunch of groups that deal with election integrity. Public Citizen, Common Cause, for example. Organizations that are focused on saving our democracy. Let me just go. So, legal defense, of course, the Brennan Center, the ACLU, Mark Elias's group, League of Women Voters, Southern Poverty Law Center. These are all nationwide, and organizations that promote honesty in media, like the Courier Newsroom, Crooked Media, the Daily Coast, the Hopium Chronicles. So, and then Flip the Vote is nationwide, and Swing Left is nationwide, and the Hopium or Activate America is nationwide. Commit to Democracy is West Coast regional. But the vast majority, there's a home for anyone, no matter where you live. And the thing about the book too is, doesn't matter where you live. I have a whole chapter on opportunities to step in if you live in a blue part of the country, opportunities if you live in the purple, and likewise in the red. And if you live in the if you live in the blue or red, you can export your time, money, and effort to where it will move the needle most in the purple swing districts. And so plenty of opportunities for stepping in with a menu of choices.
I love that, because I'm a DC girl, and 95% of us voted for not Trump every opportunity we got, and so you feel like you're in an echo chamber because you are. The new administration that moved there, that's a different story, but the vast majority of people in DC are very progressive and very blue, and we don't even have representation, and so you really feel like a big old joke, so that definitely resonates with me, because it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Send Eleanor Holmes Norton another email? They're going to have me arrested if I call her again, honestly, the poor woman. She needs to retire, but that's another conversation, but she's been in their job longer than we've had public telephones, you know what I mean? It's too long, but listen, I'm from DC. We're allowed to take those shots, but I really like this because I think it matters. Give us something that we can sink our teeth into, and even me, I'm in Costa Rica, but I started this podcast because I'm like, I have a podcast company. I know how to do this stuff. Maybe this can be. Some of my friends were like, please start a podcast so that my parents stop doom scrolling for 30 minutes once a week at the very least. And I was like, I'll do my best, But it just feels like, you got to do something. And it is very isolating. Listen, it was isolating years ago when I was very loud and vocal. Everybody used to always say, everything's about racism with you, isn't it, Molly? And I'm like, 'cause it is. You know what I mean? I don't make the rules. I'm just playing in this game, So people have been sick of me for a long, long time, and I'm used to that. I kind of wear it as a badge of honor. But living in Costa Rica, I'm in a different country, and people don't care as much. As they shouldn't care as much. They don't live in the United States. So I also feel isolated at times, watching everything fall apart, and everybody's at the beach with a cocktail in their hand, and I'm like, I also want to do that too, but I don't know, man. Things are really bad, and I feel like if you don't do something, then what is the point, right? What is the point? So what I want to ask you is, what is the hard work that really moves the needle that people really don't want to do? Because I feel like it's really easy to say, I want to do something and run for office. And there's a few people that are getting pushback for that. But I also kind of feel like, hey, if you're motivated to do something, just do it, because nobody knows what the hell they're doing the first time anyway. So you might as well join the club and just do it for the right reason. But what could people really, really do? Because I ran for office in D.C. a couple years ago. I was asked to be on this slate, and I quickly realized I had no business being on it, and I barely lost, thank God, But what I did do was then reach out to people and say, hey, I'm really good at media, I'm good at videos, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. How can I support your campaigns? Because I don't necessarily want to give you $5. We're all sick of that. You know what I mean? Help us fight Trump. Send money. You know what I mean? Hey, plot twist, we're all broke because of Trump. You know what I mean? That can't be the only solution. And so I try to encourage people, hey, if you're really good at something, go volunteer for somebody's campaign. Go put those skills to use. You're really good at corporate. You're good at tech. You're good at AI. I guarantee you, every single one of those people, I've interviewed a lot of people running, and a lot of them can barely get on Zoom calls and stuff because they have spent their life in civil service or in the military or doing things that didn't involve technology and marketing and branding. And so they need help. Everybody needs help, right? These organizations need help. So what is the thing that nobody's doing that really, really moves the needle that we should be doing?
Well, first of all, you're doing what everyone should do. Lean into your skill set and your strength and your passion, right? And so it can be fun, interesting, and meaningful. So musicians, like we were working to have a big concert. So we were working with producers and musicians to do a streaming version of what we tried to do in 2020. So if you're a musician, you can lean into that. I write about that in the book. If you are a school teacher, teaching civics is critical, but motivating your students. College students can be registering voters at their campuses, which are target-rich environments, especially in the purple swing districts. And it's not too late. The next 3 or 4 months matters in terms of voter registration. And in the book, I list a bunch of voter registration organizations that people can connect with easily. If you're a lawyer, you're a paralegal, this election is going to be contested. It will be loaded with all kinds of nefarious strategies and efforts to undermine a free and fair election. So if you're a lawyer or a paralegal, and you don't even have to be a lawyer, consider volunteering and protecting the vote. And that means there's some trainings you can do. When I was in 2004, I went to Pennsylvania and I did legal protection. And we won that state and we protected the vote. We need that more than anything. And the reason why, Viktor Orban lost his election by a landslide 2 months ago. And he led for 16 years as an autocrat who basically dismantled the Constitution and the free press and so on, and led with propaganda. And he would still be in power today if it was a close election. But because it was a landslide, he couldn't contest the election. So legal protection is so important, and people who need to consider that. People, please consider taking election day off. And if you live, no matter where you live, I strongly recommend spend a weekend or more in September and October in a purple state. No matter where you live, you're either a close drive from, if you're in a blue, like in DC, you could drive to Pennsylvania. It's a purple state, right? Not too far from North Carolina, where Roy Cooper's running for the Senate. So in 2024, I had a great time. For the month of October, I spent 4 weekends in Tucson, and one in Nevada, that is. And I met my college roommate, and several friends stayed at his house, and we walked precincts, knocked on doors. Now, is it the most glamorous thing in the world? No, but the alternative of losing is something that's just not tolerable. So knocking on doors, committing to election day off or a weekend in a swing state, making phone calls, doing the same, writing postcards, or even text banking. It's all in my book. And again, it's not glamorous, but the alternative is not only unglamorous, it's scary, dangerous, and frightening.
At the end of everything as we know it, not to be dramatic, but I think, and I've always been a bit of a conspiracy theorist on some level, but I just thought there was like accountability. I thought I really didn't think that we would ever get here. Like I'm bewildered by what's happening on a daily basis, even though I always kind of knew it was corrupt. I just didn't think it was this corrupt and this wide open. So you talk a lot about turning grief into resolve, and I think that really matters. One of my clients passed away this week. Rest in peace, Dr. Margaret. She was a lovely, lovely, phenomenal, incredible human being. And so I have been working 15-hour days for the last 3 days because I'm turning my grief into resolve too, because if I sit with it for too long, it's not great. I think so many of us are feeling so much grief, and I think it started with the pandemic and the Trump and loss of family, this division, right? Social circles, families. I mean, everywhere you look, there's a lot of grief for what we've lost. And I think we're just sort of stuck in this place. And I like this idea of like turning your grief into resolve. I woke up in the middle of the night to pee because I'm 50, and that's what you do 17,000 times a night after 40. But I looked at my phone like an idiot, and I saw a video of police officers just beating a man senselessly, and it just, you know what I mean? And then I just cried. I just cried because it's not normal to see those things. And angry as I get, or irreverent, or as much as I curse, people think I'm aggressive, but I'm just a empathetic softie who cries whenever nobody's looking, and I just turn that into a lot of anger because I don't know what else to do with it. And so I'm trying to turn it into action. So what is your advice for people that are feeling this same kind of grief? Maybe it's grief because they're looking at their own family members, kind of like me, and I'm going, have you always been this way? Did I not realize that you were the kind of person that could support this? Or have you always been that way? Or their husband, or their wife, or their friend circle, whatever it might be. What would you say to those people who are really feeling that grief and that loneliness right now? Or even people that were Trump supporters that are starting to deflect and they're feeling that loneliness because it is a cult, and when you leave the cult, they're not super nice to you. So what would you say to those people that need to do some of this grief into resolve kind of work?
Well, yeah, it's a lot about the stages of grief, right? And the Kubler loss. No matter what the loss is, you have to go through the cycle, and it's not always linear. And during the first couple of months after 2024, I was surprised at first as to how many people were so demoralized, feeling powerless, and on the sidelines. I was ready to roll because I turn. The way I navigate is I just have to turn anxiety into action. That's the only way I assuage my concern. I mean, I'm such a news junkie, but I don't fall into the doom loop because I'm like, all right, I can go down a rabbit hole and do what the Trump administration or regime wants us to do, is just to be distracted. And as they fled the zone, we can't let them flood the zone. We can't follow the shiny object down into the rabbit hole. We have to basically turn our grief and our anxiety into action, and that brings us together. And so much of our society has been impacted with the algorithms that drive us to our devices, and people aren't going to church or synagogue, or they're not gathering like they used to. They're just alone with their phones or their screens. And so that's a larger issue, but it's compounded by this grief and feeling alone. And if you're in a red state or red region, you're feeling even more alone. But I think honestly, the way out of this is coming together, joining a group. I mean, people that join a group are healthier, they're happier, they're more resilient. The data shows that. And so it's an antidote to all of this. So joining a group you can't understate the importance of it. And it opens doors for more meaningful, effective actions that assuage our concern in the first place. And I refer to it as political therapy. I mean, it sounds a little trite, but it's therapeutic to come together on a cause that moves the needle in whatever capacity we can offer. And especially if you're in a red state, a red region of the country, even purple, you'll find kindred spirits that are just down the corner that you didn't know about. And the thing about Indivisible, you go to the website and you plug in your zip code, they'll connect you to an already existing group nearby, or form one. They have a whole effort toolkit on how you can form your own group. It doesn't matter. You can 5 people. 5 people is better than being alone by yourself.
Agreed. Yeah, we did a little, there was a No Kings protest here in Costa Rica. There was like 7 people at the end of somebody's driveway, but whatever. You know what I mean? It's all that matters. It was an effort. I appreciate this. Political therapy is right. I feel like you should send me a bill for therapy because, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, what have I posted? You know what I mean? I posted that cop video. I should probably take, I want people to know, but I don't want to make them feel worse, right? Like it's a fine line, right? And suddenly people are paying attention to me, and I want to use that power for good, and be more intentional. And I remember during like Ferguson era, a few of my black friends were like, hey, we really appreciate you advocating, but could you maybe ease up on posting every single video of black people being brutalized by the police? And I was like, I'm so sorry, right? Like, we don't actually need to see the brutality to know that it exists. And so maybe I'll be a little bit influenced by some of the things that I'm sharing, because it's not all doom and gloom, but it's a lot of good news. But it's hard, right? There's a lot of bad news, man. It's like one little string of the spider's web is good news, and the rest of it's bad. But it is there, the Michigan auto workers divested from. I mean, there's some big things happening, but they just get so buried. I have one question for you, and it might be a little bit of a hot button question, but I don't think it is. There's a lot of pushback right now with like the Democratic Socialist movement, right? And I see a lot of people upset by that. And I don't really know enough about where Indivisible stands, but like, is that something that you see as like a shift in the Democratic Party? Is that, so if people are feeling the Mamdani effect and they're interested in this, should they still pursue joining groups? Are these groups willing to this new shift in consciousness? I guess I should ask, because I don't know, to be honest. So I don't know the answer to that because I've never joined a group like Indivisible.
Yeah. The Democratic Socialists, like I would probably vote that way, given a choice, or the Green Party. But I'll share a couple thoughts. One, I've learned the hard way that I can't always vote my conscience because I need to be pragmatic. And so, as far as the Green Party, I'd probably vote the Green Party or Democratic Socialists in most cases, and I often will do that if I have a choice at a primary, but then I will vote for the candidate with the most likely probability of winning if they're more middle of the road, because I want to win. But having said that, there's a lot to be said for we cannot be fighting in an internecine way. We can't be the circular firing squad, and we have to recognize, and it's trite to say, we have to be a big tent because demographically it works in New York City. It won't work in
Right.
parts of Texas.
Right,
So
right.
we need to be that big tent, and we can't demonize people that don't precisely agree with what our policy areas of focus are. So we need to nurture that, let it happen where it does, and work it all out in the long run. The big problem, I think, is that we have been demoralized and demonized the Democratic Party. One could say for good reason based on 2024, because there were mistakes that were made. And there were some mistakes that had been made prior to that. But if we abandon the Democratic Party, we do that at our own peril. And it's a revamping, there's new leadership, there's lessons learned, there's a 50-state strategy. We can't ignore them. And the Democratic Party has a new vision. And so we have to, in partnership, join an organization like Indivisible or any of the other 70-plus organizations in my book. They together, as grassroots organizations, focus on winning together with the Democratic Party, will allow us to regain and hold on to power. But if we don't support any of the groups, or we don't support the Democratic Party, or one versus the other, we'll do that at our own peril.
I could dig it. That's my kind of feeling on the matter, too, and I think I would probably vote socialist as well. But, again, I'm from D.C., so, like, what works in D.C., like you said, wouldn't work in lots of other places in America, and I get that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different set of rules, a different beast, a whole different thing. But I like this idea of embracing all of it and getting together and joining a group, because it's like you said, people that are in groups are more resilient, more healthy, more effective. And that's what we all need right now. And I think a lot of that split is people feeling that they're not a part of that group, or that group isn't a part of what represents them. And so there is a disconnect. And if we could just find our way back, you know what I mean? Like new leadership, new ideas, all of that, right? Nothing is perfect, and I think we have an opportunity to really, they say when you boil the cabbage, right, like all the dirt comes out. Well, we done boiled the cabbage, and we are seeing all the dirt. Actually, Dr. Margaret, rest in peace, she would say you can't clean the kitchen if you don't see the dirt. And I think we are all seeing the dirt right now, and now it's time to start cleaning it up and not deny that the kitchen's dirty, right? Because that's the worst thing that we can do. The kitchen is clearly very dirty, and we need to clean it up, but we got to do it together.
Right. And the other thing we need to be focusing on, just big picture wise, is the Democratic Party for a long period of time was outspent. And as a result, they had to make some hard choices. As a result, they ended up focusing up until recently and recently into 7 swing states and ignored the other 40 some states. And that was a reality that is no longer relevant because for the most part, small dollar donations has leveled the playing field and allowed the Democratic Party to actually lift their head up and say, okay, we can start focusing on the other states. And I raise that for 2 reasons. One, because by ignoring the 43 other states, give or take, we've lost power in the state legislatures, in the chambers, and in the governor's mansion. And the downside of that is you don't build a bench for higher office, but at the same time, you don't have the opportunity to have power for the governor to appoint reasonable, nonpartisan justices to the state Supreme Court, which has all kinds of consequences. And during the redistricting, you don't have the power to redistrict. So it's really hurt us. And so we need to be thinking about a broader strategy to focus on the other 40 states. There's a great organization that we just did a fundraiser for last night called the States Project. The States Project is focusing on investing in state legislative houses and in governor's mansions. And a year ago, they focused on Virginia. Look what happened in Virginia. Abigail Spanberger won by double digits. They regained power in the state house, and they came close and will probably come back to getting this fair redistricting before 2028. So investing in Virginia had all kinds of co-benefits. Now they're focusing on North Carolina, because North Carolina is roughly a 50-50 state, a purplish one that could lean bluish. But they have something, I forget the numbers, but like 75% or more of the congressional seats are in the hands of Republicans because of redistricting. And it's so completely outrageous and unfair. And so by investing in the States Project, and their focus this year is North Carolina, in the future, we need to focus on the red states. Because if we don't focus on Florida, and we don't focus on Texas, and we don't focus on the other red states, we will also lose. And the reason for that, as you probably know, is people are moving from the Northeast and the Midwest to the South. And so the congressional power is shifting. And if it shifts to red states that aren't invested in, then we won't control the Senate and we'll suffer in the Electoral College.
And we'll be right back to where we started. And West Virginia is a great example of that. It's a great example of that, getting left behind and forgotten about, a Democratic state, and then look what happened. And now they're, like that documentary somebody did with Bernie Sanders about a year ago was really eye-opening. It was West Virginian, and he took Bernie around and talked to people, and they were like, wow, I thought you were some kind of crazy man who liked to go, like their perceived ideas and notions about Bernie Sanders. And they're like, you're just a normal guy. Like, yeah, that's what happens when you listen to each other. But it was really, he gave the whole history about how it was a Republican state, and then it flipped to Democrat, and then the Democrats basically forgot about them for 40 years and watched the state go into disarray, and now they voted for Trump because they're desperate, right? They're desperate. They believe what he said, and now they really regret it, of course, because West Virginia is one of the states suffering the most right now. They still haven't gotten any hurricane relief from that hurricane a year ago.
There's a new organization. So the book is part of a book series called the Writers Integrity Network, and one of the authors in this series is a former MAGA guy named Rich Logis. And Rich was all in on MAGA for the longest time. And he drank the Kool-Aid, and he understood the disconnect over time and basically left MAGA and wrote a book called, One Betrayal Too Many. And you might want to interview him. And he's the executive director of Leaving MAGA. And he's a really good guy.
I've seen him, yeah.
How many times. Yeah, and Rich is great, and he's just super committed to talking with people about, their how they fell into it and it's cult-like and how they get out of it. So anyway, people like West Virginia and others have been, at the mercy of propaganda, disinformation, and it's time that we invest in these red states for our future in the long run.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Well, Gary, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. I really appreciate your 40 years of service to fighting the good fight and putting all this grief into action and anxiety into action. I think that's excellent advice. I think people who didn't consider themselves anxious before might be feeling a little bit anxious these days. And so this is excellent advice. I encourage everybody to get your book, get that list of 80 organizations. The whole point of this podcast is what do we do next? Because I just needed some tangible ideas on what do we do next other than calling Eleanor Holmes Norton again. And so this is, I'm serious. We got one person to call. This woman was like, stop calling, Molly. We're going to have you arrested. Like we can't take any more of your phone calls. And so I'm going to get the book, and I'm going to get that list of organizations, and I'm going to reach out to them. And if you know anybody from those places, I'd be happy to interview them on the podcast and help give them some more exposure because it's tangible items that we can actually do. And I also love these like Zoom parties. I think it's really smart. It is really important. Moving to Costa Rica, finding friends was really important. When you're in a strange place and everything is different, it's really important to have friends. And so I think that we're all in a strange place and in strange territory, even if they're not in another country. And I think it's a good time for us to find solace in one another and have hard conversations, even inside of the Democratic Party, about socialism or whatever everybody's upset about. Let's figure it out under the tent so we can move forward. Because the reality is that tent is like Joseph's Technicolor coat of many colors. That tent encompasses every type of person from all walks of life. And so it's really important that we respect and maintain that as Democrats, as humans on this planet,
Yeah, and ultimately, I just think of what we've taken for granted for the longest time and how much is at risk. And the book is, we are the power. So we all need to step into our power, right? And be part of the solution and have no regrets and leave it all on the playing field because it really, I can't imagine waking up on November 4th thinking, I wish I'd done a little bit more, and now we're in an autocracy and we're close to it already. And it's not an exaggeration to say that. So yeah, everybody can do their part, and there's a how-to, and you can step into whatever works for you. So I thank you for the opportunity and wish everybody the opportunity to assuage their concern and feel hopeful because it's in our power.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you, Gary, for your time today and hanging out with me. And maybe I can undo a little bit of my dad's ill will in the world. Oh, what a mess. It's like Family Ties. Alex P. Keaton, his parents were hippies, and he was like a little conservative with I don't know if you remember that TV show, but his parents were total hippies, and then he was like a little conservative with a briefcase. So like my parents were the conservatives, and I'm like the raging anarchist of the family. So I'm just trying to undo some generational curses,
Well, you can get your dad one betrayal too many, maybe that might awaken him to another mindset, right?
I thought the exact same thing when I wrote it down on this piece of paper, so he loves to read. Maybe I'll send it anonymously, not that he wouldn't know exactly where it came from. But we can pretend.
Handwriting.
Exactly. Well, Gary, thank you again. Honestly, doing this podcast is the best gift ever because I get to hang out with people like you, and it gives me some hope in this somewhat hopeless feeling situation that we're in. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care, and we'll win this thing and move forward.
That's right. And like Gary said, don't wait a couple months. Start now. Start canvassing. Start hanging out in Purple State. Start having hard conversations. Get the book. Join the group. Throw a Zoom party. Raise money. Bang, bang, bang. Let's do this because don't wait until we are up against these elections to start doing something because it matters now more than ever. So thank you for tuning in to What Do We Do Next. If you are inspired by this, send me a note. Let me know. If you've got some guests that you think should be on the show, please connect them to me. I would love to open my platform to anybody who's trying to make the world a better place. One vote, one petition, one step at a time. And I almost forgot, before we go, if you want even more detailed, specific, action-oriented advice, go to the website. We will put all the links in the show notes below. But there are several toolkits on the Indivisible website that is angled towards Gary and his work for you to be able to do some workshops and some homework in advance to give you some real tools to kind of set you on your way. And those will be available on the links below. So make sure you check out the show notes and go check out those workbooks. So until next time, please be excellent to each other, and I'll see you real soon. Thanks, guys.